I win them back emotionally? Because there's some staff that you have there physically who aren't as dialed in as they used to be. And
Yep.
I think sometimes we think, oh, if we just pay them an extra 25 cents an hour or an extra quarter an hour, or extra, whatever it is an hour, that'll fix the problem. But I tell directors this: uh, you cannot fix an emotional problem with a physical thing.
And the
Yes,
other thing is, leadership, guys, is not a title. People are going to gravitate to where they feel heard and valued. So it could be the janitor in your school, right? That janitor might know everything that's going on in that school, right? To me, working with the partner, that's like a marriage. It's a work marriage, right?
absolutely.
You're in a room with someone 9 hours a day for 5 days a week. That's a work marriage. So sometimes too, I think when you are, and I don't want to say venting, but when you have a concern or something and you want to run it by somebody before you bring it to your boss, you might, share like, hey, I don't think this is right, or, I feel like no one's listening to me. And I feel like if you have where people are not communicating with each other, I think is also like they're not trusting each other. Like, oh, she's going to go, I don't want to use the word snitch, but Marcus Kosho here with another episode of the Childcare Director's Chair podcast. I am so happy you're here. I love you. You can listen to 1,000 podcasts, but today you picked mine. So yay. So today we're going to talk a little bit with someone you may know, especially if you're from Texas. But he is going to bring a lot of fun to today's episode. Before we start, what are we even talking about? Well, according to a study by National Association for Childcare Professionals, 70% of childcare providers reported a lack of trust among staff. And when that happens, it negatively impacts the ability to deliver high quality care. So we want to really emphasize how critical having trust in your work environment is for both the staff and the children that they serve. And today we are joined by Albert Wright, who is a speaker, trainer. He has a lot of accolades here, but was voted one of the best trainers a couple years in a row through NAA. Is that correct? So why don't you tell folks a little bit about yourself? Because I'm sure you can do that much better than me, and then we'll dive into the content.
So what's up, everybody? My name is Albert, and really, with people who've never met me before or never been in a space with me before, I always tell them that really I do all this, I speak, I do all these things, but to my core, I'm just a 3-year-old teacher. So for those of you who have been in the classroom before, you know what that means. And then right after I did 3s, I did 2s. So I got a little bit of an edge about me. Okay, all my 2-year-old teachers, you know what it is. So yeah, I've been in the field since the '90s, and I've done everything, like I said, from 3s to assistant director to center director to district manager. Yeah, and I'm just happy to be here today with you guys.
So for our directors that are listening and you're not sure, maybe Albert, you can shine a little light. What do you think key indicators might be that your organization has some trust issues within the team?
So one of the first things I see, and this is subtle. So
Mm-hmm.
directors, I'm speaking to you specifically really quickly. First, even before you start looking at your staff, I need you to look at you. And I need you to kind of take stock in your heart and how you feel about things. Because what I found is that if you struggle, if you're struggling internally or mentally, they can struggle internally or mentally. So after you've taken stock in yourself and you've kind of assessed kind of your feelings and how you're doing, if you then you look at them. So if I'm walking through the halls as a director, and every time I walk through the hall, everybody's like, and then they see me and they're like, hold up, y'all were just laughing, and all of a sudden now y'all like, yes sir, Mr. Albert.
Mm-hmm.
That right there is one of the first signs that there may be some sort of disconnect. Now I want them to have a healthy respect of you, but I don't want it to be so kind of one-sided that they don't see you as a part of the team. And I think that's what some of us directors kind of lose sight of while we're worried about, licensing regulations and restrictions and all these other things. We lose sight of we really just need to be a part of the team. So that's one of the first things I look for.
Yeah. I think the other thing too is when there's not trust, you'll start to see breakdown, not even like I would say even with the teachers themselves, because now they're afraid to, like, let's say I'm a partner, right? To me, working with the partner, that's like a marriage. It's a work marriage, right?
Absolutely.
You're in a room with someone 9 hours a day for 5 days a week. That's a work marriage. So sometimes too, I think when you're, and I don't want to say venting, but when you have a concern or something and you want to run it by somebody before you bring it to your boss, you might, share like, hey, I don't think this is right, or, I feel like no one's listening to me. And I feel like if you have where people are not communicating with each other, I think is also like they're not trusting each other. Like, oh, she's gonna go. I don't want to use the word snitch, but she's gonna go snitch on me. Is she gonna snitch on me, or she's trying to brown nose the director. She's gonna throw me under the bus. So I think you'll see that too within the classrooms, and you feel it. You can feel it, like you said. You could see it. Everybody stops, but you also can feel it too when you walk in a room. You know when two teachers are not getting along and when they are.
Absolutely. So teachers, I've already I touched directors for a second. I'm coming to you, teachers that are looking at this that may be on here. Don't think you was gonna you wasn't gonna come into the podcast and be like, he better tell my director something to do. I'm talking to you now, teachers. That's one thing that's really important is making sure that you have that level of respect and trust for each other. Don't snitch, and it's not like a snitching to like get understanding. It's just kind of to keep up gossip.
Mm.
So this is what I found. If I'm working closely with somebody and I'm like, okay, I need to make sure that I'm frustrated, something is going on, and I need kind of a confidant.
Mm-hmm.
If someone was to come to me and say, hey, this is one thing that I'm struggling with or whatever, be respectful of that. Don't go around talking about the water cooler stuff with people who you're close with. Like, I need to know that I can trust you just to have a bad moment. And people a lot of times say, I have a bad day, I have a bad day. No. I don't believe people generally have bad days. I believe you'll have a bad 5 minutes that you'll talk about all day. So I think if you put that in perspective, we're all human. There's sometimes you're going to just be like, I'm just frustrated today. I'm just frustrated this minute. Can I get a minute? And if you're the co-teacher, I need you to be able to look at your partner and be like, okay, hey, I got Wyatt today. You good. I'll take Wyatt. You take Samantha. Okay? And you got to be able to bounce that stuff off of. Also, if you are a co-teacher and you see your co-teacher, or if you're a director and you're walking by and you see the whole class in timeout, that is a clear sign of somebody who is breaking down. If you're a director, you're like, hey, why are they all in timeout? They were all talking back. Even that kid is nonverbal. He ain't even got words. He was talking back. He looked at me funny. Well, okay, it's you. It's going on with you. So, and if you see that as a director, be willing not to necessarily discipline your staff, but gently walk alongside of it.
Even for a sounding board to just say, hey, this is how I'm feeling about that. Am I wrong? Right? Because someone else's perspective can also change the way that you think about something. And that happens a lot with one of my directors. And I'll have a whole different perspective. And it's not that I don't agree with you. I just don't see it in that same way. So sometimes when you're just talking out loud too, somebody else can just bring some light to it for you.
Yeah. Talking to somebody who's not in the weeds with you sometimes is really important. This is one reason why whenever I'm working with a group of directors, especially if they don't know each other, I always say, hey, before we leave today, I need you to exchange phone numbers, emails, whatever it is. Because as a director, there are just some things that staff won't get. They just won't understand. So having another director to bounce ideas off of is key. Oh, look, directors, look at me really quickly. And don't be like, I'm not talking to that director because she's going to steal my kids. Nobody wants your kids. Nobody wants your kids. Talk to these other directors. We all need a friend.
And I think collaboration is so important. And that's why community groups, community organizations like you and I, we're not in the same state. We're across the country from each other. But we understand because we've been there, right? I've been in all the ages. I don't know those twos though. You're right. I can't do those twos. God bless the unicorn teachers that are the 2-year-olds. But I think it's just really important to have trust. And one thing I do see with some leadership though is if somebody comes to you and tells you something about their life, their confidence, whatever, not everybody in the center should know it. And I've seen, so it's really important that if you want them to trust you, they have to really truly be able to trust you. And when you take folks in the office and maybe you're taking them in there to discipline them about something or go over a policy because they continue to be late and they break down and tell you it's because they're taking care of their, their sick brother or their, something that's going on in their family life. Maybe they're going through a divorce. Not everybody should know that, right? It's really important that we keep that level of professionalism and confidentiality. So, can you share what are some of the common reasons why trust starts to erode in a workplace, particularly in a child care center?
Well, I think one of the, and this is one thing that we're seeing across the country. One of the biggest things that I'm seeing why this trust erodes is a lot of it started with COVID, and COVID just broke a lot of us. Like the way a lot of us went into COVID is not how we came out of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
COVID broke a lot of us, and because of some of the regulations or the rules or the standards us as directors had to uphold, staff didn't understand that. Like they didn't always understand why you have to cut people or fire people or we have to furlough everybody. So just that right there, okay, trust has been diminished. So now you as directors have to figure out, okay, how do I win my staff back? And not just how do I win them back financially, how do I win them back emotionally? Because there's some staff that you have there physically who aren't as dialed in as they used to be. And
Yep.
I think sometimes we think, oh, if we just pay them an extra 25 cents an hour or an extra quarter an hour, or extra, whatever it is an hour, that'll fix the problem. But I tell directors this, you cannot fix an emotional problem with a physical thing. If they broke emotionally, you have to help them emotionally. So one thing that I just say is try to have one-on-one meaningful conversations with each of your staff to just see where they are, what's going on with them, whether it be something mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. I've heard directors say, well, Albert, I don't want to touch them emotionally, or I don't want to talk about anything outside of the school. And I have to remind them that they are 100% people. So what happens at home a lot of times affects them at school. The things I recommend, first and foremost, us doing as directors is taking stock in what's going on with our staff, talking with them on an emotional level, and not necessarily always as a boss, but figuring out kind of what those needs are and have strategies in place. There have been times when I've been a director where I've had to call a homeless shelter, or I've had to call a food bank, or I've had to
Mm-hmm.
call a church to see if they could help with different services.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let me say this to directors too. Some of you may be listening to me right now and thinking, hey, Albert, why do I have to do that? Like, I didn't break it. It's not my fault. Why do I have to do it? Well, I look at it kind of like how we work with our kids. Our jobs is to fix things that we didn't break. That goes with our children, that goes with our staff, and a lot of times that goes with us too. So if you want to figure out kind of what to do with your staff, a lot of it goes back to let me observe there's a problem going on. And after I observe something that seems off, having that conversation. Like, don't be afraid to pull them into the office and say, hey, how are you doing today? And if they start getting defensive, I haven't even asked you about work yet. We aren't even talking about work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying how are you as a person doing.
Yeah.
And if they share something with you like, hey, I'm going through a divorce, then you being emotionally good enough to say, hey, you know something? Some of the stuff you're going through, I've gone through. Just that right there makes you human. Like me personally, I went through a divorce a few years back. I did not realize how many of my friends had gone through it until I started going through it, and I felt alone. I felt like I was the only one that had ever gone through it, just because that's how I felt emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
And then a lot of my friends came out of the woodwork and said, "Hey, dude, I went through this. These are ways I was able to kind of help, not just help me, but help serve her well, help serve the kids well."
Mm-hmm.
And hear me, none of that had to do with actual work. But at the time, I didn't need work help. I needed personal help. So yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things we can start off by doing as directors.
I think too, I love that. And when I think about this is going to seem unrelated, but it is, um, you set that tone right as soon as you meet people. So during an interview, perfect example, I'll ask somebody, tell me about yourself. and they immediately hop into, well, I got my degree here, I have this experience, and I'm like, "Oh, that's great. Tell me about you." Right? So you can start that right at that first, so they can have a good understanding of what your culture is like. And so when you show them right up front from day one that you meet them, that you care about them as a person, you're going to get a lot more buy-in, a lot more buy-in for sure. So all right, so let's say we've identified some things are not doing great. What maybe the first steps that leaders should take to start rebuilding that trust with their employees?
Okay, so first thing I would do is I would figure out what resources you had available to you, or maybe available to some of your the people in your circle. I'll give you an example. I had one teacher who just she was having just some house issues, like her house was just basically falling apart. One of my parents I knew was a handyman, so I worked with one of my parents to figure out if we could provide some services and help this teacher with her home. Those things had nothing to do with the school.
Hmm.
Other things I saw was I had one teacher who just struggled with difficult or problematic kids, or kids with problematic behavior. There aren't problematic children, there's problematic behavior. And I had one teacher that just struggled with that. She lived in a very kind of Mary Poppins-esque kind of world. Like everything was skinnamarink dinky dink, skinnamarink doo. And that real hard child, that child that just had an edge about her.
Get a different tune.
I need you to put some rap in there, some gangster rap in there.
Get a different song in his head.
So one thing I did with her was I was like, okay, to help that child, I need you first to know that child. Introduced her to some things that child listened to outside of work, outside of school. I also had parents help that parent with some verbiage they used at home. So, for example, there's one thing that I tell my boys every time I leave them before I go out of town, or I leave them to go to school. I always tell them the same thing. I said, "Hey, buddy, I love you. Go be somebody." Now, what happens is if my child is struggling at school, I've told my teacher to use that verbiage so he knows it comes from me. So that teacher will be like, "Hey, Sebastian, your daddy told me to remind you, hey, buddy, he loved you. Go be somebody." So now Sebastian knows it did come from my daddy. And those little tricks and those little tools like that sometimes help teachers be like, okay, now I can start winning some ground. Before I was real frustrated with this child, I couldn't connect with them. But now that I have this little nugget, okay, now I feel like I'm starting to kind of get some rhythm. So providing resources, whether they be resources that are conventional or sometimes a little unconventional.
So let's talk about like communication, like the role of communication and how that can help restore trust.
So communication needs to be first and foremost consistent across your management team. We kind of understand, and we've seen the director, assistant director, and the office manager may approach situations differently
Mm.
because of how they feel or their experiences or their whatever. And as they're telling staff, oh, well, this is how you should do it. If they aren't unified in that, that could cause a lot of problems, cause mistrust. Because if a staff member is like, hey, I talked to, Miss Donna, and Miss Donna said this, but you're telling me something different. Now I don't know who to believe. It's probably best to, before somebody in management makes a decision or says something across the board, to go back to the rest of the management team and make sure that all of their messages are unified. I don't like it when it becomes a mom says this and dad says this
Oh,
type of thing. I need everybody on the same page.
yeah.
So
That happens a lot. It
yeah,
does.
so communication, it has to be unified and consistent, no matter who they're talking to.
This morning, actually, a perfect example. This morning, there was a message that needed to be conveyed to some staff. And so I called my center director and I said, hey, put so and so on the phone. That message had to come out of my mouth to
Hmm.
that person. There was several teachers. I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus, but I just didn't want anything to change or the translation to be lost. But it was a message that needed to come from the top up. But yeah, I think sometimes it is difficult too, because on the flip side of that is we're not clones of each other, right? I can say something literally the same words as someone else, but my approach might be different. My body language might be different. My tone might be different. So I think although you have the uniformity, you also have to try to figure out a way that you don't have this mom or dad division, because that they'll have one director that they lean towards more than the other. Maybe that person comes across more with more empathy or more understanding. But it's important to be aware of that. If you find that your team continually keeps going to one person, just evaluate that. Try to dissect that. Why? Is it a good thing or a bad thing? Is that
Yeah.
person letting them get away with everything? Or is it that they connect more with that person? And the
Yes.
other thing is, leadership, guys, is not a title. People are going to gravitate to where they feel heard and valued. So it could be the janitor in your school, right? That janitor might know everything that's going on in that school, right? And you may not. So I think, where people are seen and heard is really important.
Another thing too is if they don't go to you, don't get offended.
Mm-hmm.
Like don't take that personally. If they, if I'm the director, I have an assistant director, and everybody goes to her all the time. Don't be like, stop going to her, come to me. Well, things like that will break down trust.
Mm-hmm.
I may even talk to the assistant director. Hey, everybody comes to you. Why do you feel like they come to you more than they come to me? And
Mm-hmm.
if they say, hey, you look scary, or your
Mm-hmm.
voice sounds aggressive, don't take that personally. Look introspective. Okay, I might look a little scary.
Mm-hmm.
What can I do to help that?
Yeah.
Or maybe I am coming across a little rough. Well, when they're talking to me, a lot of times I'm thinking about something else, or I'm worried about something, or trying to do payroll or something like that. So maybe you need to say, if somebody comes to you during that time when you're trying to do payroll, hey, right now I'm really struggling right now. I'm really kind of involved in this. Can I talk to you in like an hour? Just saying something like that lets them know that they were heard.
Mm-hmm.
But right now you're not in the best frame of mind to give emotional advice, but you do want to follow back up with them later.
Yeah.
That comes across a whole lot better than stop talking to me, because then the trust is broken again. Oh,
Yeah.
I very rarely find trust being broken in one big thing. A lot of times it's a lot of little bitty things that just erodes it away. I think it was Ali that said, it's not the rock in your shoe, but it's the pebble.
Mm.
And a lot of times just that little bitty pebble is the thing that just breaks down trust.
That's great insight. What about transparency? So, what are your thoughts on transparency when it comes to rebuilding trust?
Now, transparency is a tricky one,
Mm-hmm.
because you want to give them enough so that they feel connected, but you don't want to give them so much that they are outside of their depth. I think some of that comes to the staff you have, talking to them kind of where they are. For example, if you have staff that are just like, they're in the weeds and they're like, hey, we're all uniformly mad about this thing or whatever, that might not be the best time to just unload everything on them, or why every decision is made.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you give them up to a point. Now, I don't say to just hide things from them, but I do say be mindful what you give them and how you give them. A lot of times it's not the message, it's the delivery of the message that gets them.
Mm-hmm.
Give you a quick example. One time I was at a school and we had to start wearing staff shirts, and I knew my staff weren't going to like it. I told them up front, hey guys, this is what's going on. We need to start wearing staff shirts. I know a lot of you might not like it, but we have to do this. What kind of staff shirts do you want? And I let them be a part of that process of figuring out if they wanted polos or t-shirts, or what the color was, or what the design was. Like I helped them I let them know I understand that this is uncomfortable, but let's make the best out of the situation. And it worked out. So
I'm like, listen, we're gonna have uniforms. I sent 4 teachers to the store, and I let them pick. So this down where we are, there's a place called Alexander Uniforms. So I sent folks of different sizes and
yeah,
age groups that they worked with, because there were a lot of things to consider. And my toddler teacher, God bless her, Miss Lori, she was probably like 45 years old at the time. That girl put on them pants. She was crawling on the floor. She wanted to see how it stretched because she needed it to be functional. My staff literally picked the uniform. I did pick the colors, but they picked the uniform. Yeah, there's the multiple reasons why you need to wear a uniform, but that's a
look,
different episode.
I'm gonna be real with y'all. And I'm gonna tell you why we had to wear uniforms. We had this one teacher that was very gifted,
Mm-hmm.
and she would always wear clothes that were just too small for her and
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable. And we were like, hey, look, we can't like every dad's hanging around your classroom. We can't have that.
Yeah.
We all got to be comfortable. We all
Yeah.
got to be comfortable. We all have to be professional looking.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I let them pick the colors, the styles, but
Mm-hmm.
I had input on the size. that
Yeah.
we wore.
Sure.
So yeah, it was a thing. So there's
Yeah.
all different kind of reasons.
I feel like transparency, I'm very, very transparent with my staff. And, you said something interesting about, like, at their depth of their level. I feel like, and I could be wrong, but this is just my feeling. My feeling, we do strategic planning meetings at our school. And the entire team, like everybody who works here, is part of that meeting. And I explain things to them so they understand. So something as simple as, this is going to sound really silly, but something as simple as, when you're a teacher and you walk into our building and you see a piece of trash and you don't pick it up, that impacts our school, and how it impacts our school, and why one kid, we just lose one kid. Because sometimes I'm like, all right, well, he left, or he was challenging anyway. Yay. I'm like, well, do you understand that we just lost $20,000? Would you like that new light table and a raise? Because I would love to give that to you. But that little Johnny who just left is leaving with our light table, right? So
Yeah.
I do try to help them understand the bigger picture and their part in it. So maybe I'm not going over line by line budgets, but just to help them understand that everything they do in our center impacts our center one way or another. When we're not nice to new people, they don't, but you want to complain that we're short staffed and that one called out. What am I going to do about it? Well, I can't fire her if I don't have anybody to replace her. And if y'all ain't nice because y'all clicky,
Yeah. Look,
sizing down the new people.
look.
Listen, we keep it real on this show. So if those things are happening, again, it's not a good work culture. So you have to look, like you said, look inside first, see if that's going on, make sure that you're addressing it if it is, because that's going to gain trust. And sometimes you're going to have hard conversations with staff that you love, and sometimes it's family members. Sometimes it's,
Yeah.
people that have been with you for years that are truly, truly like family. So you have
Yes.
to have those hard conversations.
A director understanding what kind of culture they have and what kind of culture they want to have is a real important part of the whole process. The Rogers in the neighborhood type of culture, but you got like a Snoop Dogg and Dre culture. Understand kind of the people you have and kind of what they bring,
Mm-hmm.
and try to. You might not ever get that Mister Rogers, juggling the shoe back and forth, but you could get something, a version of that still feels authentic to the
Mm-hmm.
staff, but
Yes.
still really good and productive to the children.
Yeah,
So
I think one of the things as leaders is, we not only are trying to reach a bar or a standard, I think about, like, set the standard. Like, I want my team to set the standard. I want a place where when people come in, like, wow, I never worked at a school like this. I never worked at a place where they cared so much, or I was so supported. And so that's really important to me. If you look at it this way, with having a great work culture, being transparent, connecting with your people, you're not going to have a hard time not only getting staff, but keeping staff. Because,
yeah, one thing I hear a lot is, you mentioned it earlier. We're
Mhm.
short staffed. Well, I think there's two components of that we forget. First of all, if you can hire as many staff as you want to, but if you can't keep the ones you have happy, none
Mhm.
of it works.
Mhm.
So I call it closing the back door. So
Mhm.
sometimes it's not focusing on how to get more staff; it's focusing on how to keep the staff that we have. That's one piece that
Keep the good
yeah,
staff that you have.
I feel you've been traumatized by something.
Well,
I feel like you got a story in there.
25 years in, couple centers, yeah.
Yeah, you got to
Yeah,
look.
keep the good ones. You got to weed the garden sometimes.
And sometimes if you have a good culture,
Mhm.
those rough ones, they're gonna go on about their business anyway.
Yes. Yes, yes, that's true. That's true.
Like I tell people, I don't fire you, you fire yourself. So yeah, especially if you're trying to keep up nonsense or drama and you realize that none of us are just gonna go for it,
Mm.
and you can't talk behind people's backs because everybody is on board with each other. People
Hmm.
just tend to be like, I don't want to work here no more. Well,
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
work don't want you either. Gone.
Can you give us an example of a successful trust building initiative that you've implemented or observed, or something that, like, some action when we get off this podcast that somebody can do that has worked?
A important initiative that I've done that worked. I'll give you one. So one thing that I did that really helped one of the staff I worked at. I've been a director of multiple different schools, but this one I had specifically was just rough. Everybody had been there like 15, 20 years. Everybody was like 10 years older than me at the time. And I just couldn't break through. I couldn't get everybody on the same page with me. So one thing I did was I started doing, and it's going to sound normal, but I started doing monthly kind of get-togethers. And during those monthly get-togethers, we did a bunch of different stuff. Like we did potlucks at the school, yes, but we also went and got pedicures together. One thing we did, kind of race car driving, and a lot of things I did. What I would do is I would do something once a month, and then every 3 months we'd say, okay, bring all family. So
Nice.
we didn't just want to partner with the teacher. We wanted to partner with the husband. We wanted to partner with the kids. And that helped a lot. And through that, through doing stuff like that, we became good friends with a lot of spouses. So much so that another thing that we started was we used to send like birthday cards home to the staff. And we also started sending birthday cards home to the spouses.
Love it.
So we would have the kids all sign a card, put their little scribble or their little picture or whatever. And then I would say, thank you for sharing your spouse with us. She's been a blessing to our school, and you have been a blessing to us as well. And we would, all the staff would sign it as well, and we send it home. And I would get the coolest stories about, a husband that would get a card from the school and say, hey, honey, this is for you. And she'd be like, no, this is for you. And then he'd be like, oh my goodness, he'd open it up and saw something like that. And that it just meant a lot to them. And they came in and thanked us or whatever. But one thing I realized was a lot of stuff we did didn't cost a lot of money. Because people think sometimes you have to fix it with money. It's just time.
Good solution for 42 cents. Literally 42 cents. Right. And then, and then he goes and tells, people at his work, and people are like, hey, I want to work there. How come we're not getting cards, right? It builds goodwill and connection to your school.
And a lot of times we got kids do that too. Like the dad would be at work and somebody at work would be like, oh, my kid doesn't like his school. And he'd be like, well, my kid loves this school and our school is great. And they would refer us. So we didn't have to do a lot of outside promoting for our school. Our parents, like our teachers and their spouses and the parents did it for us.
Yeah, I feel like that's such a great little enrollment tip. I was talking about enrollment earlier today with another gentleman on, well, I guess when we release this, it'll be 2 days ago, podcast. But we talked about the importance of having that human connection with the people in your program and how that really helps you, as you said, get those referrals and stuff. So before we wrap it up, maybe what advice would you have for leaders who are hesitant to address trust issues head on, right? Maybe you're not as assertive a director. Maybe you don't like confrontation. Like, what would your advice be? Because you can't ignore it. It's not going to go away. It's going to get worse. So what would your advice be there?
So if I was advising a bunch of new directors about how to start this process, my first step would be, okay, just breathe. A lot of times it's not as hard or as bad as you think it to be in your mind. So first and foremost, just breathe. After you've taken a breath, assemble your management team and bounce the ideas off of them. What do you think is our struggle? What do you think would help? How do we communicate with them? And you come up with a strategy that really kind of fits your staff. And this is one reason too why it's hard for me to kind of give you, if you do X, Y, and Z, you'll get this response, because I don't know your staff. These are the strategies that I found, but how to implement them is up to you. I'm not going to ignore it. Why? Because that old adage of one bad apple spoils the bunch is absolutely true. One misplaced teacher could tank a school. You've already assembled your management team. And then the next thing is have a staff meeting. Don't do it by newsletter or memo in a mailbox. Get everybody in the room. I like that because I want everybody to hear the exact same message, the exact same way, at the exact same time. And once you get them in the room, just be honest. And it can start off like this. Hey guys, first of all, I love you guys like a fat kid loves cake. But right now, we're not all hitting on the same cylinder. And I really, really want us to. What do you need to feel loved?
Yeah.
What do you need to feel cared for? And I would start the conversation just like that.
Yeah.
And of course, some people are going to gripe, Some people are going to complain. Some
Mm-hmm.
people are going to have some things. But I would say, hey guys, I know there's some struggles, and I want to address your struggles. But right now, what do you need to feel connected? Don't get caught up in the struggles. Don't get
Mm-hmm.
caught up in the defending the company or defending the organization.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get caught up in all that. Be singly focused on what can we do to help us.
Yeah.
And you do that, and it comes.
Yeah.
And don't expect it to come quick. You
Yeah.
think you're going to do it on Tuesday, and everybody's going to be, friends are friends forever and hugging and kissing by Friday. This is not the last day of summer camp. You know what I'm saying? Your
Takes time.
relationship, yeah,
Yeah.
your relationship didn't break quick. It might not get fixed quick, but keep working at it, and it'll come.
Yeah. And I think you used the key word right there, relationship. Right? It is a relationship, and like any other relationship, it takes time. You can break it quick, but you can also always rebuild it, and be honest and be humble. Like, you're just because you're the leader doesn't mean you know everything, right? So just let them know. Just share that you're human too. Oh my gosh, this has been such a delightful conversation, Albert. I thank you so much for coming on our show. For those of you who are listening, Albert goes out. He does speaking all over the country, as do I. So if you're holding a conference and you are looking for a keynote speaker, a breakout speaker, please contact Albert, contact me. We are happy to come out and help you at your next event. I'll leave the information and the links below. And as always, remember, it's the small details that make a big impact on the success of your childcare business. Have a great day.